Hello and welcome back to this tutorial series, a retrospective review of RuneScape's historic tutorials. Unfortunately, we heard this afternoon that Mod Poerkie wasn't feeling too well, so he isn't able to host the stream today. But fortunately, today's episode coincides with our first guest appearance on this series. To join us on our adventure into the past, I'm delighted today we have the lead designer for the Troll Warzone tutorial. Say hello, Mod Jack.
Hi. I'm not sure I can keep up with this level of cinema.
Enthusiasm?
Yeah, like what's the right word? Professional, like streaming voice.
Oh, don't worry, it won't last for very long.
Let me see if I can do it. This is Troll Warzone. Is that right?
Not bad. That was pretty good. Okay, yeah. So Mod Jack has kindly been volunteered to monitor the chat and gather your questions, which is handy because his design experience makes him exceptionally well equipped to directly answer you. I have a slide prepared later in the deck to give Jack a proper introduction. It'll be worth the wait. So, to the first slide, please, Mr. Spear. Gotta love that transition. This week, we begin our journey through the Troll Warzone, the 6th version of RuneScape's tutorial. It's been 3 weeks since our last episode, and you may wonder why this stream is an hour earlier than usual. That's because we're intending to move this series to a monthly cadence of double-sized episodes. 2-hour stream, 2 developers, 2 primers, double the trolls, double the fun. It's going to be a wild ride.
It's double the pride, double the falls, Stu.
Oh, okay. I don't watch enough TV. So, Troll Warzone was one hell of a tutorial, with an emphasis on cinematic, narrative-driven conflict. After an epic opening cutscene, it begins with a primer, the first 5 to 20 minutes that tutorializes core concepts of how to play the game. This primer, the first chapter of the Troll Warzone, called Stop Them in Their Tracks, could be thought of as its introductory tasks, a series of objectives to introduce you to the absolute gameplay essentials. Troll Warzone also shipped with a vast array of post-primer tasks encircling Burthorpe and Tavley, introducing all the member skills and providing enough content for at least the first 4 hours of the new player experience. So this week, we're going to focus on setting the scene, followed by the primer. Troll Warzone went through several iterations, including 2 drastically different versions of the first chapter, shown on this slide. Both versions culminated in defeating a troll boss called Morningstar. We'll see if we have enough time in today's episode to compare both primers. And now a little bit more about Mod Jack, who unfortunately
got invaded with my children.
This is the challenges of working from home. Mod Jack has his whole family there with him. In fact, he's doing this on his day off, which is very kind of him to join us for this.
Specifically pointed the laptop away from the door so that we wouldn't see the children coming past, but they just came in and flocked around me. So. Sorry,
Fantastic.
Steve.
Okay, so initially a developer of content such as Gunner's Ground in 2010, Mod Jack has designed RuneScape game updates for 10 frickin' years. If you ever feel like you don't know Jack, it's because Jack knows everything. When it's too big to fail, Jack's usually the man we bring in to make sure that it doesn't. You can thank him for leading the design of behemoths like Troll Warzone and the mining and smithing rework, which probably aged him another 10 years. He is a purveyor of fine and spicy memes, as clearly evidenced on this slide. Your boy Mod Jack was also a design reviewer on my first RuneScape project, the Fish Flingers rework in 2012. He cites his proudest accomplishment is this player feedback thread, written in the form of a parody of You're Welcome from Moana, which he is going to sing for us now, a cappella. Take it away, Jack.
That is the high point of my development career, actually. But no, I'm not going to sing it now. For everyone else's benefit, really. I haven't had enough wine. Maybe later.
Fair enough. Well, karaoke stream. It's going to happen someday.
Yeah.
So I have some slides prepared with publicly known backstory to ease us into Troll Warzone, but is there anything about this project you're itching to reveal to us right away? Preferably through the medium of a song.
Yeah, it was an odd one, Troll Warzone, because it had a really tumultuous development process. It started out. So you've got your little. You do all the project prefixes, right? And the prefix for this one is OMGE. It's not a tutorial. It's not like TUT7 or something. It's OMGE, which stands for Opening Members Game Experience, because the project was originally conceived of as when you buy membership, so the game has a tutorial. It's always had a tutorial. We keep changing it, but it always has one. But when you buy membership, nothing happens. You just log in and you've got membership now. So the idea was to create an area that people who just bought membership for the first time could visit, that would introduce them to members' features. It could send them towards good members' content. It could tutorial the members' skills, which didn't otherwise really have a tutorial, because obviously it didn't make any sense to put those in the free area. And then about 3 months into development of that, the project priority completely changed, hang on, what was it? We decided to do a membership deal. Like, everyone who joined RuneScape, all new players would get like a week of membership for free. So they would start as members effectively. So this then became effectively the default tutorial experience, because you were a member, you would get put here instead of put in Lumbridge.
Right.
And
so was the Lumbridge tasks disabled at that time, or was that's still active if you were to lapse out of your membership?
I'm not sure. I can't remember that. But what it meant was that this became effectively the tutorial. So the whole thing got reimagined to be a tutorial for everything, not just a tutorial for members. And that's how what was supposed to be a members tutorial became an everyone tutorial, and we ended up stuffing every skill and all sorts of stuff into Lumbridge. So it was never intended to be a tutorial in the first place, and it was well into development at the point when it became a tutorial.
So how long was the development cycle of Troll Warzone? I mean, you found out after the first 3 months.
It must have been over a year. I mean, my memory's not very good for that kind of span of time, but it must have been over a year, I think, of going backwards and forwards on things, and changing priorities and changing. And then we would get quite quite broad feedback that would very much change the point of what it is we were trying to accomplish. So you credited me as lead designer on the project, but that's not really true in the sense of it was a very, very business and production led project. So we would get quite a lot of requirements from production and from RuneScape management at the time. I don't think any of them.
I guess if the priority is membership upsell, then understandably there's a business need there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'd get quite a lot of very detailed, very sweeping feedback that meant whole things had to be changed over and over again. It took quite a while.
So was this originally intended to have a much shorter life cycle then, given that you did this 3 months later, you found out that you were changing direction? Were you intending to turn it around in a much shorter period of time?
Yeah, the scope. Yeah, I mean, we were. Again, I don't remember clearly, but I think we were verging on sort of, well, we're basically done. And then the scope of the project radically transformed and hugely expanded, and so we sort of had to take what we had and then figure out a way to fold it into more things.
So those additional requests were things like reworking the quests in Burthorpe and Tavley and things like that, making it fully voiced.
Yeah. All of the stuff about you need to make the combat triangle needed to be introduced. The skills all needed to be introduced. And we as a result of what was happening, we ended up duplicating. I spent the longest time, as far as I'm concerned, Blood Pact is a perfectly good combat tutorial, right? Like, it gets the job done. I think it's surprisingly underrated, well written, as a quest, but it introduces the combat triangle perfectly well. But because we were in Burthorpe and that apparently wasn't negotiable, we spent a long time trying to figure out, can we get the player to go and do Blood Pact rather than having to write our own version of it? But it just didn't, it didn't work out. So, I'm sure those are questions that you're familiar with in what you're doing at the moment.
Well, probably just as well that you didn't want to go into too much detail with the combat, though, because then you had the evolution of combat come out later in that year, and then that's why we have two different primers.
Yep.
Right. So I'd imagine there's probably quite a lot of questions that have accumulated in the chat at this point.
I've not been paying attention.
While you're having a look at that, see if there's anything that you want to answer at the next section. I'll do a slide or two. So first, the disclaimer. The stream is going to discuss a specific tutorial from RuneScape's past in troll-tastic detail. We're not showing off a new tutorial or hyping any future content. If you're just here for LootScape, that is cool, but please bear in mind there's more than enough trolls in this tutorial. I am unable to see the chat, but my lovely assistant Mod Jack will keep an eye on your tutorial questions, and will occasionally stop for some relevant Jack and Stu and A along the way. It's
There's not
been
really
nearly...
any questions in the chat.
Okay, cool.
Sorry,
well,
go
if
ahead.
you've seen anything that jumps out at you, feel free to answer as we go along. It's been nearly a month since our last tutorial, so let's review where we are in history. Last episode, we explored the Lumbridge introductory tasks, a wide variety of tasks that introduced players to content in Lumbridge and helped ease them into RuneScape and its mechanics. Originally the first 4 hours experience after Unstable Foundations, these tasks proved to have more effective retention without the first 30-minute primer in Roddick's cellar. So in May 2011, Unstable Foundations was removed, and after character creation, new players went straight into the Lumbridge tasks. Or not, if they prefer to just ignore the tasks and do their own thing. Troll Warzone, released January 31st, 2012, was the next generation of this approach. The opening game experience in Lumbridge was designed with new free-to-players in mind. The opening members game experience, or OMGE, was situated on the brink of the members area, just beyond the infamous members gate into Burthorpe and Taverley. Originally intended as a members-only alternative to the Lumbridge tasks, the Troll Warzone showed off all the wonderful benefits of being a member, like the diverse range of member skills, wrapped in an exciting narrative framework of grim and gritty warfare with the trolls. During development, as Jack just noted, plans changed, and Troll Warzone became the tutorial for free-to-play and members. So, can you recall what the core aims of this project were, like what its design parameters were, what you were trying to accomplish with it in the early phase before it changed?
Before it changed, it was essentially give a gentle introduction to members content, show off what the members game is giving to you, essentially reassure you about, you've purchased members, you're a bit lost, you don't really know how to take advantage of that or what that really means or gives you. So for players, obviously some players already well know what they're getting, whereas other players sort of they buy membership because they want to play more RuneScape, but they're not really sure what to do first. So the idea was to sort of, it's a player who's expected to be familiar with the basic mechanics, but who doesn't really know how to take advantage of their membership. So it was going to introduce the member skills, and I think probably get you started on some members plot lines, but I don't think we ever really went anywhere with that.
Can you recall how it differed structurally from the version that we got? Did you still take the circuit around Burthorpe and Taverley, introducing all the member skills, for example?
The circuit,
more freeform?
The circuit was added very late, actually, surprisingly late. That was added long after the tutorial aspect had been added. Initially, the circuit wasn't there.
Right. So was it initially mostly the primer section, that early section in Morningstar's cave, or was it also?
It was the cave didn't exist. It was there wasn't any narrative content. There was no sort of narrative to hold it together. It was just it was just essentially the skill tutors for the member skills. That was really what the project the meat of what the project was actually supposed to be about. And
presumably inspired by the presumably inspired by the different characters in the character creation screen, where essentially you had these different roles that you could choose from. Because I know we use the same method as tutors.
I may be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure that was me that suggested that long after. I don't think that was originally part of it. So when I came on board with this project, it had already been decided that it was going to be Burthorpe Taverley, and they'd already started development. Rouget. So Rouget had already remodeled all of Burthorpe and Taverley when what's his mod name? You know his mod name?
Mod Alex.
He did a lot of.
So there we go. We've completely exposed him to the world.
Yeah, there we go. Doxed him.
Yeah. Sorry, Alex.
Mod Alex did a lot of the recent archaeology stuff. He's fantastic, and he is so fast. He's an absolute machine. You just go can you remodel this whole town? And he's like, yep. And after the weekend, you come in and there's a whole new town there. So he'd already finished remodeling Burthorpe and Taverley before I even started on the project. So we had this remodeled Burthorpe and Taverley, and then we were plugging in content to it, But yeah, essentially, it originally started as just the skill tutors for the member skills. I'm sure there must have been other things as well, but I can't remember them. They all got superseded.
And I imagine things like the cinematic cutscenes came in as a much later stage when when it was more narrative focused and trying to
much later,
make more high production value.
Yeah, because the initial change. Stop me if you want to talk about it later. But the initial change was when it became effectively the tutorial, the default tutorial for everyone. That just radically expanded the scope of the tutorial. It was given to us as a requirement. Let me put it that way. That all skills would be featured in the tutorial, which isn't something I personally agree with. I don't think the tutorial needs to or should introduce all skills to you, but we were given that as a project objective. So the tutorial experience needs to show off all of RuneScape skills. So essentially we added one skill tutor for each skill, and the idea was that you could explore them at your discretion. That was the compromise. Effectively, was we would add all skills, but you could go and interact with them at your discretion. So you could go and talk to the hunting tutor if you wanted. You could go and talk to the smithing tutor if you wanted, and it was only much later that we introduced the sort of formal narrative circuit. It was based on some feedback that again was given to us as a directive. Turn it into a linear narrative experience. And the thing I complained about at the time was essentially, if we link it all together like this, people will assume it's a constructed narrative, and they won't be very impressed with the constructive narrative because we're just hacking together a bunch of. So all of the components of that narrative actually already existed. Like you give the guy the sword. I think at that point the introduction it was in the cave initially, right? The cave introduction existed. Then there was an optional thing where you could go and make a guy a sword, and then there were, what would you call them? Like we call them acts of heroism or something. There are these little things you could do around the area, like rescue someone from a burning building, make the guy the sword. There were a couple of others. You met each of the signature heroes doing a thing. You could interact with the tutors, but all of these were individual, accessible. Like you could just go and do them or not do them. Completely separate from each other. They were just things in the area to enrich the area. And then they all got strung together into a mandatory circuit that took about 3 hours to complete.
Right.
And at that point, it then resembled a sort of linear mandatory narrative. But it was never a linear mandatory narrative in the first place. It wasn't intended to be one. The parts weren't built as one. So it was a bit weird and confusing to be sort of, you know what I'm trying to say? Like you were walking through something that looked like a story, but it was effectively just being forced to complete chapters of something that had nothing really to do with each other.
Which sort of explains why the narrative kind of unravels the further you get down into heavily, and you're starting to open up into other plot lines and so forth, and it gets kind of sprawling. So that makes a lot of sense.
Random things happen. Yeah.
So structurally, it sounds like it went. Structurally, it sounds like it went back to something more akin to learning the ropes, where it's an exhaustive linear series of chapters that you go through that went for this really long, epic experience. Like you're on this railroad and never feel like you're going to fall off it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there was a real fear at the time of again, it was partly like people not knowing what to do, and partly people not, getting the whole experience sold to them. And I think that decision process really undersold the exploratory, finding your own objective sort of so key to RuneScape, right? Like exploring and deciding for yourself what matters and what's important. And I think the feeling at the time was very much like, but what if they don't know summoning exists? They might not realize how good value it is. We must show them summoning.
Right. Yeah.
And the whole tutorial ended up designed with that ethos in mind. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Which is why it's so long.
Yeah. So ideally, because you mentioned from a design perspective, it's not ideal to present all the member skills to the player. What would you prefer for us to focus on in terms of which skills we should be introducing?
RuneScape is a game that fundamentally involves skilling, right? So you need some skilling. You need to understand the introduction between gathering and production skills. The ideal for me is essentially like something along the lines of you're taught how a production skill works and why it's useful initially, and then you're taught a gathering skill in order to provide materials for that production skill, something like that. Because once, like mining, post rework, mining and smithing and woodcutting are different, but the relationship between them is very similar, right? Like there are individual mechanics to learn for the skill, but fundamentally you click on a node in order to get some materials, and then you go to a production bench or production object in order to produce things, and then you make the things that are useful to you. And as long as you understand those two concepts, I think you don't need to be introduced to every skill. Well, if you understand how mining and smithing works, you can understand how woodcutting and fire making and fletching work.
Yeah, that seemed to be more kind of the ethos of the Unstable Foundations tutorial, that it focused on the core concepts rather than getting into too much of the details. So like it introduced the notion of gathering skills as a concept, and then you picked between woodcutting and mining, rather than explicitly requiring you to learn about both, kind of taking things at a more abstract level.
Someone in the chat asked, why not make 2 tutorials, one obligatory for free-to-play and one optional for P2P? That was exactly the original plan, and then we were instructed not to do that, basically. So the reason that Troll Warzone didn't do that is because we were told not to do that, which was not a decision I agreed with at the time. But yes, I think trying to introduce all the skills at once is madness, personally. Sorry, you had a question.
If I did, I've forgotten it. So
someone wanted to know what shampoo I use, to which the answer is whatever's on special offer.
Wow, spicy questions in the chat today.
Yeah.
To give you a chance to find some more questions.
Someone's quite angry that we are both white men.
Okay.
I apologize. I apologize for that. There's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so I'll just do a couple more slides then. Some of these are going to touch the same aspects that you've covered as well, but it gives a bit of a summary. So Troll Warzone was a huge area rework of Burthorpe and Tavley that rearranged and conjoined them into a bustling, chaotic front line with wounded soldiers, beleaguered refugees, and war-torn architecture. The Witch's House was also moved below Tavley, consequently affecting that quest and Grim Tales. And the Rogue's Den and the Burthorpe Slayermaster moved south from Burthorpe to Tavley. Troll Warzone brought with it a phenomenal amount of supplementary content. 3 extensive quest reworks, Death Plateau, Druidic Ritual, and Wolf Whistle, to bring them up to date and integrate them with Troll Warzone storyline, as well as a new quest in Tavley, Let Them Eat Pie. All these quests, much like the Troll Warzone itself, were fully voiced. Druidic Ritual and Wolf Whistle were no longer required to start training Herblore and Summoning, and Death Plateau was no longer required to smith claws. If you'd previously completed them, you can optionally play the 3 reworked quests, but your previous progress counts, so you don't receive any additional quest points. Is there anything about the development of the quests that you'd like to talk about, Jack?
Let Them Eat Pie was hard work. The problem with these being tutorial quests was that there was a huge there was a huge problem between the needs of them as tutorials and the needs of them to be individual quests in their own right. So you remember Mod Wilson, and Mod Wilson was a really talented writer, but part of what made him a talented writer was that he had a very unique voice. He had a very distinctive way of doing things. And that wasn't a good fit for a tutorial, unfortunately. So like we were trying to contradictorily at the same time give him like a unique authorial voice, but also like require him to do specific tutorial things in a specific tutorial-y way, right? And that wasn't a good fit. So we ended up, I think, like Let Them Eat Pie went through something like 20 major revisions or something like that. I've never seen so much feedback on a quest. It was painful for him, and it was a horrible experience for him to have so much. He just kept getting torn to pieces and rebuilt, and torn to pieces and rebuilt, and he was frustrated about it, and understandably so, because he started with this quite sort of. I think what came out in the end was okay, but I think the needs of it to be a tutorial, and the needs of it to be a I think we ended up having to sort of fight to defend it, because Let Them Eat Pie is a little bit edgy, right? Nowhere near so much as when he started. I mean, if you're familiar with Mod Wilson's content, you can imagine what the original version might have been. And it got toned down a lot because it's sort of like, well, this is the first real quest in the game. It needs to really sell RuneScape's tone and so on and so forth. And that involved a lot of sort of back and forth and interfering with the authorial voice. Let's put it that way, which is a bit difficult for everybody. That was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, the tone is an interesting one, because when you compare it to things like the acts of heroism you're doing around Burthorpe and Tavley, you're being this bold and noble hero helping people, and then you have this story happening here that's much more subversive. To me, it's always like if you'd played Cook's Assistant first, this is like the darker version of Cook's Assistant, where structurally you're getting the recipes for this item you're making, but you're doing it to cause someone to vomit violently and making people suffer in response to them making other people suffer. It's quite dark and twisted, but certainly in a way that Mod Wilson was very good at writing.
Yes, that reminds me. Yes, it wasn't. So Let Them Eat Pie dates from the version of the tutorial which wasn't linear. It was part of the original aims. Yes, I'd forgotten that. Sorry. Part of the original aims was that there would be a new quest in the zone. So there would be this different optional things you could interact with, and then there would be this new low level, because usually when we make novice quests, they're free quests. This would be a new members quest that would be placed in the zone appropriate for new members. So he made this quest, and the quest had been made, and then when we re-engineered it to be a tutorial, it had to then be converted into a cooking tutorial quest, effectively, which it actually wasn't originally envisaged as, I don't think.
So it wasn't like it was
obviously had a.
It wasn't intended to be like the improved members version of Cook's Assistant.
I'm misremembering that. I think it was supposed to be a sort of satirical take on it. Okay. It's possible I'm misremembering that, but I don't think I am. But because what you said prompted me that I think it was written on the assumption that you had already completed a bunch of free content, and you would go into Let Them Eat Pie having completed a bunch of free content, and then it became effectively the first quest in the game, which radically changed what the quest was about. Because there's a huge difference between this is your 10th quest and this is your first quest.
And presumably reworking the other quests in the area came with that shift in direction later on, when we came to a much larger scope and everything's being voiced.
I think that was the same case part of the. I think initially we if I remember correctly, we changed. Remind me to talk about ops later. If I remember correctly, we changed the requirement to have completed. So Druidic Ritual and Wolf Whistle unlock skills, and we changed that requirement with this. But I think we changed that late. So initially we reworked those quests as part of the pre-tutorial OMGE to effectively just to freshen them up and make them a bit more modern. And then later we changed it so that they weren't locked behind them anymore, but we'd already committed to sort of reworking them as part of the content delivery. Again, it's possible I'm remembering that wrong, but I think that's correct. So they were already planned to be reworked before it became the tutorial, which is why they ended up being kind of the major content for that, for the zone. But they no longer had the skills locked behind them. They sort of were more conceptual, thematic tutorials for those skills rather than like literal tutorials that mechanically lock the skill.
Right, gotcha. You mentioned something earlier about hops or ops. You wanted to bring up?
Oh, ops. Yeah. The thing I'm most proud of changing, we changed a lot of low level, like as I've kind of talked about, like the production was troubled and looking at your layout chart, it's really sad that we spent longer working on this than it remained in game, which is really sad. I think because it was only live for like a year and it got changed multiple times during that year, so it was quite a lot of work to just get immediately removed again. But we did change a lot of mechanics as well, like the attempts to revise RuneScape's low-level mechanics in order to make them more accessible. Some of that, in retrospect, perhaps changes the identity of the game. I think there's an interesting discussion to have on that. I'm glad that we have old school so that we can preserve we can have a sort of modernized version of RuneScape but preserve the classic version of RuneScape. I think it's really good that we've got both. But the concrete example is that prior to the OMGE, if you want to cook something, you have to use it on a fire. If you click on the fire, nothing happens. if you use the food on the fire, it brings up the interface. So MakeX existed prior to this update, but we expanded the use of MakeX. And the really big change was if you click on the fire, it pops up the MakeX interface, which kind of seems like obvious, intuitive UX, but that wasn't a thing in RuneScape prior to that. And it's so, we did a lot of user testing and, watched how people play the game, and they walk up and they click on the fire, and they expect that to do something. They expect the fire to respond, because that's how you interact with the world. RuneScape prior to this was very much still based in the adventure game paradigm, use object on object, or use object on thing in world. And expecting... People came to RuneScape. The adventure game genre is outside of sort of Kickstarter projects and relatively niche titles for fans of the adventure genre, has largely passed us by now. So people who are coming to RuneScape new now aren't expecting those paradigms. That's completely alien to them. The idea that you use something on something just isn't how any other game works nowadays. They expect that if they want to cook something, they'll click on the fire or click on the food in their inventory or something. And so that changing that, I think, made RuneScape hugely more accessible in a way that the tutorial itself, obviously is largely gone. But that change has persisted and has, in a sense, sort of defined, in a big way, the difference between RS3 and OS, or one of the major differences. The relative accessibility of the two games.
Yeah.
Someone asked, what affected the direction of the quest with the goalpost moving so much? Do you think it affected the overall results of the quest? I mean, it was primarily sort of like morale and time, right? Like it's exhausting and demoralizing to have, for the developer to have me giving like 17 rounds of feedback on the quest to things that need improving. So I think it was like the quest came out okay as a result at the end of it, but I don't think it was a fun experience for anybody involved, because we were sort of trying to sort of hack something that wasn't designed for this purpose. Like, imagine if you took like Wild Gothic Sleeps. Imagine if you were given like, take Wild Gothic Sleeps and make it into the tutorial. And then, like, it would just be a horrible process, right? Like, no one would have fun doing that. And it wasn't that bad, because it obviously...
Yeah, and you have to refactor that. With the case of these quests, structurally things are a certain way. There's already fundamentals in there that you can't really move around. You're having to try and adapt it to that rather than being able to design it for its best purpose for that tutorial. So that was very challenging. It sounds also like you're effectively in a middleman position where you're getting this feedback from other stakeholders and having to feed that back down to the developers. That must have not been very pleasant in itself.
Yeah, I mean that's largely my job a lot of the time, really, which is just okay. I'm used to that. If I don't agree with the design direction, that's a problem. I don't mind being the middleman. It's a bit frustrating when I don't agree with the thing that I'm passing on, if you see what I mean, But yeah, my job is to understand the design direction and the design requirements, and then find where the current development isn't meeting those and give feedback to push them more in that direction. So yeah, in that sense, I'm responsible for taking what's there and turning it into more of what's expected.
Okay, so you're more the design reviewer for the project in the traditional sense of how we would have a design reviewer for a quest developer, as opposed to being the lead designer who had more of a
yes, I mean, I didn't really have any say in the overall objectives of the project. I did. I had a lot of influence over sort of the way things played out. So at the point where we were told, make it into a linear experience, it was my job to then sort of sit down and write that linear experience and try to pull all the pieces together into a cohesive whole and. Determine what the story was going to be and how the characters. There were a lot. So who was on that project? It was Mod Wilson, Mod Molter, Mod Lino.
I've got a slide later on.
Have you got a slide?
Yeah. So let me just hustle through a few. I'll try to get to that stage, and that'll hopefully get us an overview.
Oh yeah,
We can talk about.
Sure,
that.
that's fine. Yeah, carry on for a bit, and then we can talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of impacting a lot of stuff in the early game and smoothing things out. Troll Warzone released with a graphical rework of most low-level player armor, which garnered more attention from some players than the tutorial itself. Melee armor up to steel. Yeah, it came out with this. There were so many supplementary things that they changed along with Troll Warzone. Melee armor up to steel, including shields, leather armor, and blue and black wizard robes, were all overhauled, including the trimmed variants. And wizard robe skirts were also renamed and given combat bonuses. There was also a high-level armor teaser that came out with Troll Warzone. The Troll Warzone update added these 3 mercenaries north of Falador. They occasionally attacked trolls that emerged from a nearby cave. the player could inspect the mercenaries to preview the upcoming reworks of Ornamental Dragon, Orbital Armor, and Infinity Robes planned for a future update. The Troll Warzone update also allowed you to lift-click bank booths to directly access your bank, and it subtly changed the outline color of the interaction cursor. The reaction to these changes in some of the videos I watched was intense. It's really quite surprising the severe reaction people have to things like if you just change the outline of the cursor. It's just such a fundamental change to how the game plays, or the muscle memory of how they access their bank. People took a long time to get used to it.
I remember another thing we changed at the time actually was member items. I think most people probably don't even see this because it's kind of confusing and annoying and unnecessary information. But member items,
in the color.
Yeah, member items' names are in gold. That came with this as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be gold, by the way. That sort of yellowish color. That's supposed to be gold. Member items show gold. Right. And I think a lot of players are just like, why do some items have white names and some items have yellow names? And then that's the distinction. It's a member's item if it's got a gold name. Yeah, that was
right. Presumably with the intention of upselling membership and making it feel like this thing's gold, or it's more fancier, it's cooler.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was partly just it wasn't really supposed to be upsell. I think that was part of the motivation was upsell. But I think it was just useful information, right? Because it can, particularly if you think about it from like a members tutorial aspect, which was the original aim of the project, it is a little bit confusing that if I let my membership lapse, some of my objects can no longer be used. So it was intended to aid with the visual recognition of that. And I've complained a bit about other decisions that weren't mine, but I think that one was mine. I think that was my suggestion. I pushed quite hard to get that in. And in retrospect, I don't think it's been a great addition to the game, if I'm honest. I don't think it actually has achieved that visual language that I was hoping it would. I don't think it's made the game easier to understand. I think it's actually made the game slightly harder to understand, if I'm honest, because there's just an arbitrary color difference, which players... I've never known anyone who understood it. Maybe most people understand it intuitively and therefore don't comment on it. I don't know. Anyone in the chat
did you
noticed this?
Yeah. Did you pick the colors yourself, or was it just a case of you want them to be distinctive and someone else took care of it?
I said gold and silver, and that was unfortunately we couldn't do a gold effect using the way our fonts work, so it ended up coming out sort of yellowish. I would have loved it if we could have done. I don't know if you remember Diablo 1. They had amazing, unique items in Diablo 1. Had a sort of gold font with specular lighting. Like, it's really ancient game, so the specular lighting was just hard coded like white pixels, but it looked fantastic, and I was hoping that we could accomplish something like that, but I don't think we could.
Gotcha. Fascinating. So the Troll Warzone also added a recommendation system that you might remember. Speaking to skill tutors in Burthorpe and Tavley, granted access to recommendations of content suited to low to medium level in the tutor's skills. These recommendations included a teleport to that content with an hourly cooldown. The quest journal and task interfaces were also updated to the UI style of that era. The recommendation system was later replaced with recommended challenges when the daily challenge system and Captain Haskell was added in September 2012. I seem to remember people tended to exploit that cooldown period. I mean, even with the 1 hour cooldown, having teleports to these things to jump around the world and use
that was a huge problem in development. Like, we're giving free teleports basically, and that was a big problem. But the priority was on accessibility rather than. I think again that's where over the years we've. I guess it's actually really culturally relevant that this is pre-EOC, and I would say our company values and ethos changed radically in the aftermath of EOC. I would say. I don't think it's unfair to say like we realised we'd made a mistake, and part of the mistake that we'd made was not listening. And this is pre that, so this is very much like peak Jagex not listening to its players, if that's fair. I feel fair saying that partly because I was involved and partly because we've hugely changed, right? We learned from that experience, and so yeah, I think we weren't listening enough to like what the identity of the game should have been, and we were much more interested in pushing accessibility than in listening to what the identity of the game should be. Does that make sense? Sorry, Stu, can you hear me? Oh.
He's back. Okay.
Am I back? Sorry, did I freeze
there?
Back.
Yeah, but you're back. Yeah, but it was
Stu,
certainly. there was a very this was a period of very brave modernization. It seemed like nothing was taboo. We're quite happy to rework core fundamentals of how you interact with the game at this stage. I guess with the fundamental intention of acquiring new users and shifting to a new audience. You mentioned also that there was a much greater emphasis on focus testing at this time. I remember seeing some Confluence pages where we'd done focus tests with teenage boys and things, getting their feedback on the game, directly engaging to find out how they responded to it. And generally, if they were fairly disinterested with something, would drastically try to change it to try to appeal to that user. Can you recall? Can you recall if this was like the first time we started using focus testing, or if we'd used it in previous tutorials?
I believe so. Yes, I believe this was the first project that got focus tested. And it was and it sort of illustrates the real strengths and weaknesses of that approach, right? Because I think the ethos at the time, I think we've got better at balancing this. It's connected to what I was saying a moment ago, right? Like there's a balance of accessibility and inaccessibility. And at the time, we were very much in the strongest we've ever been on everything must be polished into accessibility. And focus testing was a big part of that. So if someone had a problem with something, we would change it. And in a way, that's part of why Troll Warzone ended up getting completely replaced by Ashdale, because Troll Warzone was a despite all of the time and revisions and focus testing, it was still a clunky and inaccessible experience. But that's kind of part of what RuneScape's about. RuneScape is a clunky and inaccessible experience, and actually, like, that's always been the tension that we have, right? Like, RuneScape is a game. You don't love RuneScape for its smooth UX, right? No one loves RuneScape for that reason. That's not what's good about the game. And so we ended up sort of almost trying to hide the game that we had, which I think is completely the wrong approach.
That was definitely the approach, I think, with Ashdale. Yeah.
Yeah. How can we best hide RuneScape? Which is crazy, because then you're not going to, the RuneScape, the tutorial's not going to excite the people who actually want to play the game, right? Mm-hmm. It's gonna bring in people who actually are looking for the experience that RuneScape can provide, which is still quite unique. I mean, there's a world of free-to-play mobile games out there, but very few of those are providing the experience that RuneScape's providing. And we were sort of trying to disguise ourselves as a generic mobile game, which is a real shame, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if
the goal is longer-term player retention, then making a tutorial that's fundamentally different from the rest of the game doesn't really seem to be achieving that aim.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this was at the height of that essentially, like, and I think post EOC we really started to learn and reflect and think a bit more about what RuneScape actually was and should be. And try to find a better, because it's not that accessibility is not important. It is really, really important, and it's not that we should throw out absolutely everything. But rather than accessibility being always the only priority, it's more like trying to find a compromise between accessibility and challenge, reward, and all the other things that are really important to make the game work.
Can you remember if the Lumbridge tasks had been completely removed at the points that we realized that Troll Warzone wasn't really working out? We would need Ashdale. Did we consider focus testing against those two, or was it just a case of it was too long gone, we had to build something from scratch?
I think it was kind of tangential to Troll Warzone, but I think it was the recommendation system that replaced the Lumbridge task system. The Lumbridge task system was the one with Maltese voice, right? Is that right?
Who did Maltese voice?
What's the guy's name? I can't remember his name.
Explorer Jack.
With the cat.
Advisor Roddick. Roddick was voiced by Malte.
I thought so. Is that not true? I thought that was true.
If he does, he's putting on an amazing voice. Because
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But I thought
they both have amazing voices. But I didn't.
Roddick was voiced by Malte. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So I think it was the recommendation system that replaced that, and I think in part because you weren't in Lumbridge, right? And also the recommendation system was intended to be sort of level. It was way too ambitious and was intended to be sort of all levels, all skills, all levels. With the idea that you could come in. That was sort of the vestige of well, what do I do if I'm a member? I don't really know how to play this game. I should be able to ask for a suggestion. So at any level, in any skill, I can say, what should I be doing? It sort of got muddled slightly because it was also a reward system. The daily challenge system was plugged into the same system. So it was, but it wasn't actually originally envisaged as that. It was originally envisaged purely as a, like, essentially suggest me something. But like I feel I've logged into RuneScape, I feel a bit lost. I haven't got anything to do. Suggest me something, and it would say, well, okay, you're level 57 in smithing, so go and make some rune. Go make some rune. Why not? Why not make 200 rune plate bodies? Like, there's the thing you could do. And it wasn't ever intended to be a sort of rewarding, like, task-based system in that sense. I think that was the same as Lumbridge Tasks, wasn't it? Or am I misremembering? Roddick would just suggest a thing that you could do. Hey, why not go complete a quest? And he didn't reward you for it. Hello, Zoe. Can I help you with something? This is my 4-year-old. Your daddy?
Yes.
What?
He was now famous.
You're pretending to be me?
Nice.
Would you mind going out of the room because I'm doing a thing? Is that okay? Could you go downstairs with Mummy?
Fantastic. I've completely lost my train of thought, so I'm just going to carry on at this stage. So after the primer,
I can't remember either.
you could now adopt a baby troll pet in the Burthorpe combat area. He doesn't age or starve, but you can feed him items to rename him. Plus, there were various extra members' benefits. A new two-handed sword with a special attack called the Keen Blade, a customizable mage staff, a reworked dwarven army axe upgraded to give XP boost as you progress through the troll wars and chapters, and of course, Tam McGruber's Wicked Hood. There's never been a better time to be a member.
Wicked Hood was actually added before that.
Yeah, because also we reworked the dwarven army axe apparently, so I guess there must have been an iteration of that was used for members upsell beforehand that then got integrated with the chapters to add those additional benefits.
Yeah, the army axe and the let me just put the chat back up. It's opened in Edge. That's really annoying. The chat's opened in Edge, and it won't. I'm struggling to read people's questions because when I'm scrolling up and it keeps scrolling back down, rather than continuing to scroll up, it just scrolls back down whenever anyone else says anything, which makes reading the chat impossible. Okay, I've opened Twitch now. That's better. That's better. I can read it. I can actually read it on Twitch. Sorry, what was I saying? My first projects were my second project after Gunner's Ground was the Army Axe and the Wicked Hood, and they were an earlier version of effectively what became OMG in the sense of like the idea was creating. The problem with membership benefits is that they're relatively abstract when you're a low-level player. You get access to things, but you don't really need them because you've got content to experience, right? Like there's plenty of content to experience already in the free-to-play game. So the benefits are more sort of. RuneScape was always designed as I play free for a bit and then I upgrade to membership when I feel like I've run out of content that I want to do. And so the idea was to create sort of low-level. They were almost like you could think of them like free gifts, I suppose. Like they were sort of like bonus gifts. And the Army Axe was one and the Wicked Hood was one. And so having made those for that purpose, they were then orphaned a little bit by the OMG, in part because we were giving free membership to everybody at the time. So they no longer made sense as upsell incentives. So we had to basically we placed them in because we had these existing items. We placed them into the flow as rewards along the flow. Honestly, they don't work particularly well as part of the flow. They're a bit strange. The Army Axe in particular kind of overwrites there's a low-level progression of like bronze pickaxe to iron pickaxe to steel pickaxe, and because the I think it doesn't anymore, right? But I think at the time the Army Axe counted as steel for everything, so it kind of overwrote that low-level progression, which I think was a shame. But the item existed, and it was very much like, well, you'll remember you deserve the item. We don't want to hide the item somewhere, so you have to go off and it seemed worse to sort of hide the item away, so we just gave it as a reward as part of the tutorial experience.
Gotcha. But it's also adding in all these additional benefits which makes it quite difficult to keep track of in your head, on top of the new skill mechanics that you're trying to understand at the time.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Maybe seems a little overcomplicated.
I think I think actually giving away complex items like that at the time is not the right thing to do, really. It doesn't. You know, the tutorial should be focused on tutorialing and only tutorialing, and not.
Yeah, that's always a tricky thing. Is that if you put rewards into a tutorial, then that incentivizes people who don't necessarily who aren't new players who need a tutorial to then want to play the tutorial solely for the rewards, but they're not interested in the tutorial aspect and kind of resented and want to just rush through it as quickly as possible, want to be able to skip it and irritated by all the pop-ups. So one's pleasing nobody if you want to put in valuable rewards within a tutorial experience.
Yeah.
Something I think that Lumbridge Tasks did quite well was that it just awarded 1 coin as you progress through the tasks. So it's like this like these feeding pellets as you go along, of just a tiny little token reward that makes you feel slightly more positive reinforcement, but not like unique items that have particular mechanics that may be a bit complicated to understand and so forth. And it just keeps it nice and simple, but still rewarding, but also such a minuscule amount of reward that it's not really worth someone feeling they need to go through this tutorial in order to unlock that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as you alluded to earlier, at least 4 content developers worked on this update, which was probably one of the largest updates we've done at the time. It was Mod Maltair, Mod Lino, Mod Wilson, and Mod Z. I'd imagine things like Clan Citadels probably were larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the latter two, Mod Wilson and Mod Z, they were poached from the Stellar Dawn team to help with this enormous update, which is just as well as it allowed them to avoid the rapid redundancies that ended the Stellar Dawn project shortly after Troll Warzone's release. I'm relieved I was able to join the RuneScape team. I remember playing Troll Warzone on my main in February or March 2012 to get up to speed when I moved to the RuneScape team while I was going through Mass's training program. The free trial membership was active at the time, the one that you mentioned earlier, and I appreciated how Troll Warzone got you hooked into the activity loop of conveniently training your member skills in the Burthorpe hub. I've always liked how conveniently everything's laid out there. You know, there's no real obstacles to engaging with these different skills. It's like this kind of mini sandbox where you can explore all the different skills available to you and just sample them, and it gives you this idea of the breadth of RuneScape. I'm guessing that was core to the design of what you're putting together.
That predates the tutorial aspect. Yes, sorry, I'd forgotten to mention that. But along with the skill tutors came the opportunity to actually train the skill, because I can't remember where it was now. But if you want to go and train Hunter, you have to go quite a long way out of your way to go and do that. It's not laid out convenient for a new player, or if you're a new player who's bought membership because you like the idea of the Hunter skill, it's incredibly inconvenient to go and train Hunter. So that was part of what Burthorpe provided was level 1 skill training options for the member skills. So there was a place to go to do Slayer, there was a place to go to Hunter. What else? Summoning. I mean, summoning you could do there anyway, right? But that was a really important priority, and I think that aspect actually has really lasted, and has I think having accessible level 1 places to train these skills is actually quite good.
Did you have a particular band of progression in mind beyond the new player levels? Because I know there are things like, say, oak trees, for example, there. So there's something to work towards for high levels and see the benefits of raising your skills.
Not as clever as it sounds. It was important to have the oak trees are quite good because you accidentally click on them all the time. So it was a good way to demonstrate the point that there is content that you need a skill level for. But beyond oak trees, no, I don't think it was level 1, and then whatever level band that content happened to go to. So Kebits happened to go to, I don't remember what it is, 12 or something. But you know, they span that level band. We didn't, I don't think, change anything or try to create a specific level experience, if that makes sense. It wasn't intended that it only go to level 8 for each skill or anything like that.
I forget, did we make member skills up to level 5 free to play as part of this update, or did that come later?
I think that came later, but I could be wrong. I don't think it came with this.
Yeah, certainly it didn't come for any of the news posts, and I imagine we probably would have mentioned that. Maybe it was later in the year, or...
I have no clear memory of this, but I would guess it coincided with the end of the free membership trial. that now that we had effectively built a tutorial that included membership content, I would guess that we increased the level cap in part because it meant that you could actually go experience, you wander past the kebits and you could actually do something with those kebits, even though you weren't. And then because then at that point, wasn't that the same time as where we made Burthorpe and Taverley free to play? Because I don't think they were free to play with the release of OMGE.
Oh, okay.
I think they were members because when it came out, there was a members trial, so they were members areas, and when your members trial ended, you could no longer get to Burthorpe and Taverley. But when we dropped the membership trial, we ended up making those areas, because that was now our new tutorial, and we'd got rid of the old tutorial. We then ended up making those areas free to play, which they've remained.
Right.
I think that was.
Gotcha.
I think it was that. So I think it was effectively adapting the mechanics of the game to the tutorial content that we had. I think it was basically that.
Makes sense. Yeah, speaking of onboarding, if we move on to the next slide, I go into some of those points as well. So because it was originally intended to onboard members, this tutorial wasn't limited to only new users. The updated Burthorpe and Taverley could be accessed in several ways. The home teleport spell was now updated with an option to teleport to Lumbridge or to south of Burthorpe Castle. On arrival, a more experienced player was informed that a new tutorial was available at the destination with an option to play it. The player received the same message and confirmation, however, they first entered the Troll Warzone area, such as by entering the East Members Gate. Confirming put the player into a tutorial mode, teleporting the player just south of the Troll Cave, then triggering the opening cutscene segueing into the cave interior primer. If you were to create a new character, you'd get similar character creation that we saw in 2011 before the Lumbridge tasks. Then after choosing your character name, you'd get the same introductory cutscene that existing players trigger by entering the Burthorpe Troll Cave. At this time, a new means of creating cutscenes was available, thanks to a cutscene editor the tools team created for our animators to use, without needing a content developer to script the camera angles and do the scene composition. At this point, cinematic cutscenes had mainly been used for quests, such as these two sequences in Ritual of the Majorat, and 6 cutscenes in One Piercing Note, our first fully voiced quest. So Troll Warzone was the first tutorial to make use of external cinematics. The tech had its limitations, still building an instance and running custom animations and splines on game entities in the Java client, but this new cinematic format automated a lot of cutscene creation that previously had to all be manually scripted. So we actually have the cinematic for the Troll Warzone available to view, but we are just on the dot of the hour now, so this might be a good time for us to take a 5-minute break because we're going to be doing a 2-hour episode, and for the sake of your own well-being, we wanted to ensure you guys also get a chance to take a break. Are there any closing things you'd like to talk about before we take the break, Jack? Anything from the chat or?
I've noted down a couple of questions. Someone said, "Why was level 5 chosen for the skills?" The answer is, I think it's just it shows you that the skills level, like you can get levels in the skill, but before any of the major unlocks come in, basically. So because it could be locked to level 1, right? Because you don't actually need to gain XP in the skill to play the skill, but that would just feel awful if you were catching a Kemet and didn't get any XP for that. So I think it was just enough. It was low enough that you could play the introductory content and see what it was about, but not high enough to unlock the next tier of content. I think was the principle.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Someone else asked why has this not been expanded on to give new players a better introduction to member skills? I think it's a priorities issue, really. Stu, you can speak for the fact that we've never really stopped doing tutorial development, right? We now have, I think, the largest team we've ever had working on what is effectively tutorial development, expanding and refining. You're probably better able to describe your job than me, right? But you're doing what tutorial teams used to do.
I mean, to that extent, core experience covers a much broader range of things. I mean, at the moment, I'm not even personally working on anything tutorial related, but we're kind of building some building blocks that will get us towards doing that sort of thing optimally in the future. So when we were doing the mobile update that came along in September, at that stage we were doing the Burthorpe paths, and we had several developers all work on that, and that was certainly a big team focused on that thing. Right now, we have several other projects underway that are more technically focused and are improving a lot of the core experience of the game. But yes, definitely aiming towards getting more work done on tutorials in the future, and that's partly why I'm doing this series, to try and gather that information together to ensure that we learn the most from the past.
Yeah, that's really helpful. But yeah, sorry. So yeah, we have. I mean, we've never stopped working on. This could say like tutorial or accessibility or in UX improvements, all that sort of thing, constantly happening. And I think the reason that we haven't gone back to tutorials for member skills is simply prioritization. That there are other issues that we want to focus on. I think.
Yeah, it's partly also we want to ensure that the starting experience is playable by a free player. So the content that we choose to introduce you to, like everything in the Burthorpe paths, we're ensuring that we're not requiring you to have membership in order to do this path. So we cover how to do the member skills.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what was that? Okay, I didn't quite catch that. Okay, right. Yeah. So we should take that break. You're right. So yes. So shall we get back together at 10 past?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Right. I will see you all shortly. And we're back. Hopefully you guys are too. I will gab for a little bit to give you a chance to get back. So fortunately, a kind player recorded the first Troll Warzone intro cinematic to YouTube. So to honor this technical leap, instead of talking over frames from the cutscene like I usually do, we're going to try playing the video on stream. Wish us luck. Warning, the frame rate on this is choppy and the sound balancing of the music drowns out the voiceover in places.
Humans, weak, work in fields, afraid to fight. Trolls, strong, strong take from weak. Take everything humans have. Stop digging!
They've tunneled through into the mine. Watch out! Huh? Come on, we have to find the leader.
That is quality. Before we continue, I have some breaking news. Mod Poerkie reports that he's feeling better and he is running a mod event on World 11 in the Troll Cave that we just saw Ozan run into, northwest of Burthorpe Lodestone. So that would be a good idea to head into that Troll Cave. It's the one where there's troll chuckers and brutes and shamans that you can fight. I think he's going to sit down a mod XP thing, whatever that thing's called. So a good place to hang out while you're listening to us. So do you have anything that you can recall from the creation of this cutscene to impart, Jack? I imagine you probably went through a lot of iterations.
No, it was relatively quick, that one. I wrote that text. I think I wrote it in an afternoon, and Mod Mark voiced it. That's actually Mod Mark's voice.
Yeah, I thought I recognized his voice.
He did a fantastic job in the booth.
Yeah.
I was trying to give the trolls a bit of a philosophical motivation. I mean, it comes from where we were sort of trying to tie it all together into a plot, right? And since Death Plateau was the ending, it made sense for trolls to be the beginning. But you can see there's a slightly odd, like they charge in to attack, and then they all run and hide in a cave because we had a cave. The cave had trolls in it. So why are they attacking trolls in a cave? Well, because they just are. They're just in a cave. So I guess they got blasted by the cannons and hid in the cave. So their attack kind of starts a little bit underwhelmingly. Which we fixed later, but yeah, that's a good illustration of like tying the story to the content that we had, right? Like, yeah. We had trolls in a cave, so we had to explain why they were there.
So you had several different aims you needed to achieve in terms of making this exciting conflict with the trolls and setting up an antagonist for them to fight against, but also needed to have some kind of self-contained area for the tutorial to start.
Yeah, exactly. Or, well, it was less sort of broad than that. More like we just had all of these different. Like we already had the cave full of trolls at the point where we were making that cutscene, so it
Okay.
had to lead. It had to be an exciting intro that led to a cave full of trolls, basically.
So the introductory tasks where you're introduced to the core mechanics of the game and you fight the Morningstar boss, that was all in place at that time, and the cutscene came very late in the process?
I don't remember if Morningstar was in the cave already. I don't remember. I think he was. I think the idea of there being 3 troll bosses with the 3 combat styles was already there as part. If you remember, I described the optional, not linear version of it, and I'm pretty sure there were 3 troll bosses that you had to defeat with the scissors paper stone combat style was part of that. And then it was then morning. I again, I may be misremembering, but I think then Morningstar became the leader of the invasion later when it needed more of a narrative tie to tie together.
Right. So from here, we're going to walk through the first of the 2 primers, the one that came out with Troll Warzone. So the player enters this instance of the Troll Cave, and they will be guided through the basic mechanics of how to play the game with their companion Ozan along the way, lead towards a boss fight. Apologies in advance for the upcoming image quality. I could only find 3 videos that included the Troll Cave primer, and 2 of them were fixed screen interfaces like this. At the time, we had 2 different versions of the game interface. One that's a fixed window with the side panels on the side, and then we had a new windowed mode, which would expand to the resolution and dimensions of your browser window. But I wanted us to be able to see the task panel instructions that come onto the left-hand side, which only appear in windowed mode. That's something we kind of suffer a similar pain with nowadays with the activity tracker, because legacy mode is a thing, and we can only show 1 panel at a time on legacy mode. Since the Lumbridge tasks were going to be the new player experience when you started this project, was implementing this primer something that happened very late in development, or what was the original intended flow after the intro cutscene?
I don't remember that clearly enough.
Okay. Okay.
I think the cutscene probably came fairly late. So yes, by that point, yes, there was a linear flow of tasks, which was a pain to sort of like everything had to be a discrete individual task because it was using the old task system, which made Mod Malta cry every time we did anything with it. We never talked about the people who are on the project, right? But like,
yeah,
I completely forgot that Mod Malta was on this project. He definitely was. Mm-hmm. He can prove that he was on this project because he remembers things that were definitely only said in meeting rooms.
Yeah,
but I very clearly remember Mod Rhino, and I very clearly remember Mod Wilson, but I don't remember what Mod Malta did on this project. And he was like,
"Yes, of course, from the task names."
We spent a year working together on this, Tim. How could you forget that? And I got like, he's a very memorable guy. I've no idea how I forgot that, but yeah, he worked on it. Yes, the tasks, yeah, they were set up as a series of essentially like 1 step linear. You have to do this, then you have to do this, then you have to do this. And we couldn't really set it up to do anything else. And then the whole idea of being able to pin a task came with this. Like, I don't think that was in Lumbridge tasks. Am I wrong? Am I misremembering that?
Sort of.
You could drag it out and have it displayed on your screen. I think
there was a task panel on which had 6 slots to it, and then it started with 6 of them initially pinned, and then you could pin them later on. But it looked like the pinning feature came at a later stage. There were some additional buttons that actually didn't fit the UI style of the rest of the interface. And then we got a newer version of it that seems to be used here. Before we move on to the control section, in the past you mentioned something to me, the design principle of concentric circles. Do you remember about that once? And I believe you told me once that that informed the design of this tutorial in the Troll Cave. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. The way, I mean, it never worked out here quite the way I would have envisaged it. But the way I think about tutorials is the worst way to build a tutorial is to tell the player that they have to do something, like have a pop-up box that says, in order to move, do this. And then you close it and just let them get on with the game, right? And a lot of games have tutorials where you have to do that. Sometimes it forces you to take the action, like, in order to advance, please click on the ground. The way I like to think about tutorial design is you're given the room to experiment, but that you're constrained in what you can do. And the idea of concentric circles is essentially like it gradually expands what you're allowed to do. So you might start out in a room, and then you would expand into a sort of a set of rooms, and then you would expand into a whole dungeon, and then you would expand into the whole world. And each time that the game scope expands, you're given more and more room to experiment. But you have to demonstrate that you've mastered the necessary skill in order to escape. So that might be, for example, the RuneScape example would be use item on item, right? So if you're trapped in a room and the only thing in the room is a key on the floor, you have to use the key on the door to escape. So the range of interactions that you can actually make in the game is very limited. You can open your inventory, you can pick up the key, you can use the key on other objects. And until you've managed to use key on door, you can't get out of the room, and therefore, but you're not told use key on door, demonstrate now that you can use the key on the door in order to proceed. You're allowed to experiment with that for yourself. And that's kind of like, so the idea is that you're sort of trapped in a circle, and you have to escape the circle yourself, and then you escape into a larger circle, and you escape into a larger circle, and so on and so forth, until eventually you reach the entire game, at which point you can do anything.
That makes a lot of sense. So rather than having egregious pop-ups telling you what to do, just by limiting the things you can interact with through sheer experimentation, you'll find out how to proceed.
Yeah.
And presumably you feel a greater sense of agency. You feel like you figured it out, and you feel a greater sense of accomplishment for having solved that rather than just following the instructions.
There's a lot of indie games that handle this stuff really elegantly and artistically. Like, they'll like, the whole screen will fade away, and there'll just be a single button, and you press the button, and something happens, and now you know for sure what that button does, and then that button will sort of move away to somewhere else on the screen, and you can get that same effect by clicking that button. Concepts will be gradually introduced to you. It's always better for the player to. It's hard. Again, it's always a compromise, right? Like, because it's another one of these accessibility versus inaccessibility compromises. But if the player actively chose to make the interaction themselves rather than having been instructed to do so, it will always be more memorable and more important to them. It's very easy to like follow a set of rote instructions and then immediately forget them. Like press A to open your inventory, and then you're like, what was the inventory button again? Was it? Well, I don't remember, because you were just following the on-screen instructions. Whereas if there's one button on the screen and it's the inventory button, you press it, you're going to remember the inventory button because it was you that noticed it in the first place and clicked.
Yeah, it's a good system. Definitely would like to make more use of that myself. So after the intro, you start in an instance of the Troll Cave dungeon, north of Burthorpe Bank. The first information you get is this camera and movement controls pop-up, which should be familiar since we've seen it already in Unstable Foundations and the Lumbridge tasks. I think you only received this pop-up if you were a new player, since I couldn't find any active user videos that included it. Much like with Explorer Jack in Lumbridge, the primer starts with introducing the controls, then a little traversal to practice those controls, followed by your first conversation and how to advance through dialogue. Can you recall if this primer was maybe designed by someone like Mod Maltair? Because it seems to be structurally quite similar to the Lumbridge tasks, or was this something that you can recall designing yourself in detail?
I think it was very simple because it was just a series of. It may even be that Lionel just did it himself. I genuinely can't remember.
Right.
I think, but it was we wrote and rewrote this over and over and over and over again. So it's quite possible that it got written by someone originally and then rewritten by me multiple times. I remember just going through the list of tasks, just constantly editing them every single day, and tweaking them, and rearranging, changing the wording all the time. We had the spreadsheet probably exists somewhere on the file system still. There was a spreadsheet of feedback tasks. We just kept updating the spreadsheet across because we didn't have proper bug tracking software at the time, so it was just in an Excel sheet. And I bet that there's probably quite a lot of history in that spreadsheet of feedback tasks that were made, and then further feedback tasks on the feedback and so on.
Yeah, I'll do some digging, see if I can find any of that sort of thing. I remember also seeing some really nice concept art that was done for Burthorpe and Tavley. I spent ages in the file share trying to find it. It was an isometric view of basically your flow through Burthorpe and Tavley that's... I can't remember his name now. Mod Neil, I think, did. Or maybe Mod Jan. And it was quite interesting to see how much the flow changed from what the original one was. Anyway, so once you've rotated your camera, you then receive notification of your first task. There's a breadcrumb trail and hint arrow leading to your objective, and like the Lumbridge introductory tasks, we don't hide away any parts of the top-level interface. So that probably would be something ideal to do using that example of concentric circles, minimize the number of items on the user interface so the player isn't overwhelmed by so much visual noise, yeah? Also, let's just take a moment to admire that steel edge decorating. Sorry.
yeah. Absolutely. Love that border. Just turning the camera is an example of the absolute tiniest circle, right? It's a little bit patronizing, and you wouldn't always necessarily want to start that slips that small. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But that's an example of I'm allowed to do the thing, and then it expands. But you wouldn't want the second one to be that simple. It's okay if the first example is literally you have to do this, but the second one should allow you to explore and figure it out for yourself, as I said.
Some new breaking news. Apparently, there's some footage from the Troll Cave that Mod Poerkie has, which we can show now.
Oh,
wow,
awesome.
It is a popular place. We've drawn quite a crowd. Nice. Check out that fashionscape.
The most commonly reoccurring question appears to be, are we going to take skills to 120? Which I guess isn't really a topic for this chat talk. I don't think there's much we can really say about that. Skills might go to 120 as and when it makes sense to do so. I think is probably the answer to that.
I guess maybe a question there is, why are we making some skills move to 120 recently? There seems to be like a shift towards that as an ethos. Do you have any kind of design understanding there?
It's to do with just providing content for players. It's not really any more complicated than that. The game naturally, like you want things to do, you want things to accomplish, and taking skills to 120 gives you things to do and things to accomplish. I don't think it's a really simple answer, but I don't think it's any more complicated. But what I don't think we wouldn't want to just blast everything to 120. I think we've been experimenting and learning about how much content does there need to be, what makes a satisfactory post 99 experience, and so we could. It would actually be a really simple update to just make all skills go to 120. Like we could do that probably with a couple of weeks, but I don't think we want to do that because there wouldn't be any content to go with it. So I don't think that would be a very satisfactory update for anybody really, because it's RuneScape is about leveling and having your numbers go up and unlocking more things, and if there's nothing to unlock, then it's not a very satisfactory sort of leveling process.
Yeah, the key thing is people want the rewards along the way to go along with that progression. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So once you press continue, the task panel slides to the left of the screen and docks into the new chapter tracker interface. Doing so draws your eye towards this new interface. For comparison, below it I've included the task panel from one of the Lumbridge tasks we played through last episode. Instead of a separate hint tab, there's now help buttons next to specific objectives. The Troll Warzone tasks were segmented into chapters, and we can see the heading for this chapter at the top of the task panel. Stop them in their tracks. There's also a nicely visual green bar at the bottom to show your progress through the current chapter. It's quite similar to a path system in some ways. Though as fixed window mode has extremely limited screen space, this overlay was only available in windowed mode. Fixed screen players would have to rely on the task list, which may be replaced with a different side panel and in-world guidance.
I think we defaulted people to windowed mode at this point, so you would have to. I think that's correct. You would have to go out of your way to be playing in fixed window mode at this point.
Oh, interesting. So sort of like a legacy feature even back then.
I believe so. I think that's correct. Yeah, we
makes sense.
People.
So there's a bit of a breathing space between you and your first objective, so you get a chance to practice the movement controls. As you approach Ozan, he calls out to you over here to help get your attention. When you talk to him, you're told how to progress through conversation. Again, a very similar flow to Explorer Jack. So the signature heroes are getting involved in the tutorial at this stage. Presumably this was to line up with them being used for marketing and promotional material at the time. Were the signature heroes part of the original brief too? Was that another thing that got added later in the process?
I think they were part of the pre. I don't think we were ever mandated to use them. I think it just made sense to. At the time, this was very much at the time when the signature heroes were sort of fairly new, and the whole point of the signature heroes was that they would be introduced as low-level characters and then they would. The original concept was that they would sort of level with you. They would demonstrate class archetypes. That was the idea, and then they would level with you, never overshadowing you, and then they would be there for the low-level quests, and they would also be there at mid-level and then at high level as sort of your companions. That was how it was originally envisaged. And I know you worked on some of the when was DOC? What year was that? Do you remember?
Death of Chivalry was it was the same year that the Battle of Lumbridge came out. I think it was 2013 or 14. Right. I've lost track of time now.
Yeah, because by the time you made Death of Chivalry, we'd already sort of deviated from that. Because Death of Chivalry kind of deviated from that pattern by kind of ruining Owen, right? Like whereas the other two-parters sort of established their character in a very straightforward, tropey way, and then built on the story. You kind of took Owen and then wrecked him. So like by the time Death of Chivalry came out, you were allowed to deviate from that pattern. So we'd clearly given up on that vision of what the signature heroes were going to be. By the time
that was an idea that very much came from Mod Osborne, who was my design reviewer on the project. So it seems like it was a direction that he himself had shifted, rather than them maintaining them in a particular everlasting state. That their own stories would evolve and they'd physically change.
They were envisaged as much more central to the experience than they are now, and I think we've sort of we've almost made fun of them in the sense, like as writers, we've almost sorry, I'm trying to reopen my Twitch chat. We've taken them seriously as characters, but I think we've sort of slightly teased or made fun of the idea that they're like tutorial characters, and we've tried to sort of expand them in slightly fresh directions. And I think that was your original your DOC inspiration for that. Sorry, your DOC version. Then I think inspired much more dramatic things to happen with Linza. Because Linza was quite sort of staid in Blood Pact.
Yeah.
No, not Linza. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Not Linza. What's the other one? What's the one in
Xenia.
Xenia. Sorry, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Although Linza also got drastically changed.
Yeah, Linza also. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Ozan then establishes your objective and its narrative framing, then steps aside so you take the lead, maintaining your agency. All the dialogue in the Troll Warzone is voiced, by the way, which I imagine was a Herculean task since this was one of the first projects to be fully voiced, and probably the largest by a significant margin.
It didn't take. We did it all in one day, I think. It's actually only voiced by 4 people. It's just they all did lots of different voices. My favorite moment.
I recognise one of the voices, and it's someone that we used for some of our later content as well. And he's really diverse.
Am I allowed to swear on the stream? I'm not actually sure if I am.
I don't know, Spearsy. Use your best judgment.
Well, it's an amazing story. It's totally worth it. We were doing the voice acting, and we had one guy in who could just do a lot of different voices, and so we got him to voice. There's lots of little NPCs. There's a miner. There's a miner that in the cave. I don't think he's even there anymore. But you rescue him from a cave in, and he says thank you. That's his only line, and we're like, he's a miner. And the guy's like, he was having a bit of fun with it. It's like, what's my motivation? Who is this character? We're like, you're a miner. You've been rescued. You have one line. He's like, can I be from Durham? We're like, yeah, that sounds fine. He's like, okay. He leans in really close to the microphone and goes, fucking Thatcher, fucking bitch. We didn't put that line in, but it was amazing. It was really that miner in the cave in Burthorpe absolutely hates Margaret Thatcher.
Wow, the character development. Good grief.
Yeah. He's got more character than anyone else in that tutorial, I tell you. Working with voice actors is really fun because they're all really charismatic, characterful individuals. So they're all just they're absolute joy to work with. It's really funny.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing the voice acting sessions on Death of Chivalry and Brink of Extinction and so forth. It just adds so much life to the characters, and we get this really good interplay with the people there as well. That they give us feedback that improves the dialogue as well, to make it easier to read for the voice actor and consequently easier to read for the player too. So I learned a lot about expedience of dialogue and simplifying it so it's easy to read in the process of doing the voice acting. It's really useful.
Absolutely. There wasn't.
So,
There wasn't actually that much dialogue, although it's quite long. So the tasks weren't voiced, which was a real shame. I think it would have really benefited if the task text was voiced.
okay.
But we didn't really have a system that would allow that to happen. That was something I was really pushing for towards the end. But I think it was towards the end where it was sort of done and it was in game. We were talking about revising it, and then eventually it ended up becoming Ashdale. But if I could have changed it further, I would definitely voice those tasks. I think that's more important than voicing the dialogue, because that's the information you really need, but it's sort of hidden away in the corner of the screen. Particularly if you're running at 1080p, which most people are, it's kind of hidden away in the corner. A lot of people don't even look at it. It's very easy to miss that information.
Yeah, that is a bit of a struggle. I mean, that's why I guess why we have that sense of motion, that we have this. You have a new task in the center of the screen, and then it slides across to the left to try and draw your attention to the user interfaces. I guess that's an ongoing issue of making sure the player's looking at the right thing, because there's so much going on the screen. So for completing your first objective, you receive the princely sum of over 1,000 coins, nicely illustrated through illumination of your coin pouch. Then a pop-up window to display your next objective to continue this flow of drawing your attention to that side panel. Since it's an overlay though, you can continue to interact with the scene regardless. Your objective is to defeat the Troll General, and are guided to the north of the cave to do so. There are some troll brutes here you can dispatch if you wish. This player apparently couldn't resist their murderous urges. The task panel includes supplementary information, such as how to toggle run mode, rather than putting that on the critical path. Ozan and Corporal Keemans follow along behind you as you proceed. As you approach the Troll General, a simple cutscene focuses the camera on him, partly to make your objective clear, and partly to ensure you don't kill him before everybody's in position. It's also an opportunity for the antagonist to get some brief character development. The trolls are aggressive and antagonistic, they're not very bright. A diplomatic solution doesn't seem to be an option, so you hopefully won't feel so bad for murdering him. The Troll General flings rocks at Ozan, who eats should he run out of health, thereby ensuring that you aren't at risk of death and can comfortably experiment with the combat mechanic, such as it was. Corporal Keemans is also an absolute mad lad and wades in to engage the boss in melee combat.
Is he using his claws at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was this whole weird plot point about how the Burthorpe guard always use claws. Like, it's so odd.
And then due to Death Plateau being required to smith claws and then getting taken out later. Yeah. Actually, the Imperial Guard got quite a massive visual makeover with this, didn't they? Because beforehand they were dressed more like ninjas, like all in black with black masks and sort of like cloth armor rather than steel armor.
My favorite is that guy. There's a guy who patrols up and down. I don't actually know if he's still there. He patrols up and down, and when he reaches the end of his patrol, he kind of stands at attention, really straight, and then turns around and goes back the other way.
Yeah, there's a lot of custom animations. Yeah. I brought that back as player.
Is the archer on the roof still there? There's an archer. There used to be an archer on the roof that has this incredibly long conversation. Is he still there? I don't actually remember. If anyone's in game, go check.
There are definitely still archers up on the roof. I don't think that flavor chat is there anymore. Basically, after Ashdale, Mod Goya had me go through and remove an awful lot of the scenery stuff from Burthorpe. He felt like it felt too cluttered. He wanted to simplify the space, so lost a lot of character that way.
Oh, Theo's saying that he is still there. That archer
cool.
is Mod Wolf magnum opus. I hope it doesn't get removed.
Oh yeah,
because this archer is like the most characterful guy, more than the Durham Miner. I think this archer is like just ridiculous.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check him out.
I can't even remember what the conversation's about now, but he just goes on and on and on. It's amazing.
I've never interacted with a character. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, go up to the roof of the castle and talk to the archer. Or one of the archers up there just has this ridiculously long conversation.
Okay, well, we'll get up to that roof shortly. So there's no complex mechanics here, since you're learning how to interact with your environment, and less so how to master a specific skill. Ozan tanks, you spank, it's simple as that. Again, following the principles of Unstable Foundations, we're just covering the core concepts of how to play the game, rather than teaching the nuances of specific skills. When the Troll General is out of life points, he falls to his knees, then hits the dirt, and fades away, leaving behind a big pile of his bones. We've completed our second objective in the primer, so we receive another 1,024 coins. But for some reason, this version gave away massive amounts of money. I'm not sure what the decision was with that compared to the Lumbridge task, just giving 1 coin at a time.
I don't remember that. I have no memory of that.
Okay. So now you know how to move.
Decision.
Okay, all right. So it might have just been potentially just a typo, perhaps. So now you know how to move and interact, and have learned so in a hopefully quick and action-oriented way. Now we move on to picking up objects and inventory management. So structurally, this is quite interesting. The Lumbridge tasks start you with things like conversation, picking up items, then it works its way up towards something that's more combat-oriented, doing the Bloodpack quest at the end, while this time around, we got into action right away. Presumably that was a deliberate decision to make it more action-packed and cinematic?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, at least by the point it was released, yeah. At the point where it was a tutorial, yeah. It was very much start with the exciting thing and then do the next part afterwards, yeah.
So then pressing continue advances us to another panel where Ozan wants to talk. However, this experienced player seems much more interested in taking their free stuff. Picking up the drops doesn't appear to trigger any tutorialization, but at least our loot-hungry adventurer is now able to focus on their conversation with Ozan. Ozan starts to progress you onto your next objective, but then hears something nearby. This triggers a fade transition and a cutscene. An adorable baby troll emerges from behind a nearby rock. So Jack, why is the baby troll in this tutorial? What purpose does he serve other than being unexpectedly cute?
I think this was just Modlino going off on one, but it worked out fantastically. Like
Okay.
Modlino is a huge Pokemon fan, and he and Mod Alex sat down to try to sort of concept. I think it was Mod Alex. Like the two of them were just in cahoots together, and they came up with this idea for this just cute little baby troll pet and just pitched it. And Mod Mark absolutely loved it and said, "Yeah, absolutely, let's put that in game." And it was also Modlino that came up with the idea of being able to feed it an item.
Okay.
So this was just like I think it's a really good example of RuneScape development gone really well. Someone has a wacky idea that's fun, characterful, sort of passionate. You know, it's not, the baby troll is not like a dispassionate corporate tutorial, right? So much of OMG has the kind of dispassionate corporate feel, but the baby troll is absolutely a labor of love on behalf of everybody, and I think that comes across, and that's why everyone likes it. Right? It's fun and stupid, and it doesn't really make sense, and you can accidentally feed it your party hat, and you know, like it has that, yeah, I think so it's literally just one developer's like fun idea that ended up being really important and powerful. It's it's very much the most memorable thing about the whole tutorial, I think.
I mean, certainly people who weren't necessarily new players, but saw the news post and wanted to get involved. They were really keen to get their baby troll, and they wanted this pet, and they were trying to figure out how to feed it things, and it created a lot of interest and activity.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like it was never designed as an item sink or anything like that. But when Lino came up with this concept, and it was just like, because obviously it plays into the troll lore so nicely as well. Like that was where the whole idea came from, and yeah, it just ended up being this beautiful, like, what's the right word, syzygy of sort of passion, and it worked really well for what we wanted. It plugged into the storyline really well. It was just a really strong bit of creative development.
So moving on to the next slide. The baby troll staggers toward Ozan and trips. Ozan notches an arrow from his quiver. He takes aim, then hesitates. The baby gazes innocently up at the signature hero and starts to crawl obliviously towards him. Ozan is overcome by squee, sheathes his bow, and snatches the delighted orphan up in his arms. Ozan supports the baby troll on his shoulder and returns to you. He ponders the origin of the infant. So there's an interesting kind of juxtaposition there. You've just had this serious combat-oriented fight scene, and then something with much more pathos and kind of humanity to it. I don't know if the intention there was to try and show the affectionate human side of the trolls with that juxtaposition?
Not
There was
exactly,
like a
not
tone
exactly
they're going
that.
for?
It's more RuneScape tone, I think. It's more about showing how RuneScape is a slightly different fantasy property than other games you could play. You know, you'd expect to go into the cave and kill the troll, right? That's just normal fantasy. Everyone would do that. But then to like have a cute and wacky looking troll pet, that's not unique to RuneScape, but it is. It's you know, it's a way in which RuneScape stands out against other fantasy games. So it's very important for us to foreground that tonal difference and almost that like jarring tonal shift as well. I think is quite important to like getting RuneScape and seeing what RuneScape's all about.
If we were to look at it more corporately nowadays, we'd say it's part of the brand, and that would make it an essential part of the flow.
Yeah.
So you then have your first dialogue choice during the primer. Sensibly, it follows the rule of 3. More than a binary choice, but not so many options that it can become paralyzing. This is basically an opportunity for you to roleplay, to express your opinion of the baby troll. You're only able to choose one of 3 options, and then the story continues. Ozan responds with a suitable reply. The baby troll interjects, also subtly suggesting you'll be able to feed it later. Ozan hints where you can retrieve the baby troll pet. The screen then fades to black as Ozan and Corporal Keemans depart. As you
we don't
fade
give
up,
you the troll at this stage because it's just it would be a bit confusing, right? It's too complicated interaction stage in the tutorial.
Yeah, it would be quite a complicated thing to do with inventory management and having to drop it and do all that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess it's a case of where the core mechanics wind up being a little too complex to tutorialize.
Yeah.
As you fade up, the third task is complete. You receive another 1,024 coins. Very precise. That inflation. The breadcrumb trail.
Like a bug, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. The breadcrumb trail. Exactly. It's a binary number. The breadcrumb trail guides you south to the exit from the troll cave. Pressing continue slides the panel over to the chapter tracker in the usual way, and we see your objective is to talk to Captain Jute outside. It also reminds you how to control your camera. This player also happens to have opened the task list, so we can see that the task panel is similar to the 2011 Lumbridge tasks in last week's episode, other than the interface is gradually transitioning over to the new UI steel filigree style. Incidentally, I don't think we ever finished converting all the interfaces over to this new style before the new interface system brought with it yet another new style for all our interfaces. They also happen to press the back button on their task panel, so I included the pinned task panel that appears. As you can see, the various new tasks around Burthorpe and Tavley are in an introductory tasks group with its own progress bar, independent of the primer's tasks. This also includes some tasks that have been repurposed from the Lumbridge introductory tasks. We also see that we're already halfway through the primer. Leaving the cave, the breadcrumb trail guides you to Captain Jute, back on the main map. His objective appears to primarily be an epilogue to the primer, to close a narrative loop. You need to collapse the back entrance of the troll cave to prevent the trolls from invading Burthorpe. Since a ground assault across Death Plateau is impractical, you'll climb to the roof of Burthorpe Castle and fire a cannonball over the front line to collapse the tunnel. You don't receive any coins for completing this task, which I guess was an oversight, but you do get a gloriously punny task name.
It should definitely have been 1,024 coins for doing that.
Absolutely. You're directed to climb a ladder next to the castle entrance to reach the roof. Once you're on the roof, the hint trail points to a cannon on the north edge of the roof. Firing the cannon fades to black and triggers a cutscene. You take aim, strike a heroic pose. Big bada boom, you collapse a distant tunnel. You've completed the 5th introductory task, and we're back on form, earning 1,024 coins as positive reinforcement for our destructive act.
That's baffling.
The player also tells themselves... I know, right? The player also tells themselves to go speak to Major Caruthers, though I don't think he was named on the critical path until this point. Divination confirmed?
That I definitely remember Bob Maltar being involved in, because he is very specific that it's pronounced Carter.
Oh, is it? Okay. I will
It's
try to
pronounced
adapt.
Carter. He's being unhelpful in English.
Okay, right. So you climb down the ladder and follow the breadcrumbs to Major Carter at the Imperial Guard training area. Carter congratulates you for defeating the Troll General and thwarting their recent attack. Burthorpe and Tavley have been hit hard by the Troll invasion, though, and they need a hero like you to help with the war effort. He makes you aware of various tutors in the zone with tasks for you. Completing this task, which doesn't award any coins, leads you on to Corporal Keyman's near the bank chest, who has the baby troll perched on his shoulder. Sean Keymans reports that Ozan dumped the baby troll on him, and like any responsible parent, he hopes to pass this hard potato on to somebody else.
Sean Keymans is a pun, but I can't remember what the pun is. I remember Modlino being absolutely delighted with the pun, but I can't remember what it's a reference to.
The troll keeps referring to him as Shanky Mans, and then Corporal Keymans...
Yeah, that's it.
It's Sean Keymans.
I'm sure it's a reference to some TV program he was watching or something, but I can't remember what it was.
Dad's Army, maybe, or something like that.
I don't know. Sean Keymans, I don't know what it's a reference to.
So you can take pity on poor Keymans and adopt the baby troll, which you can rename by feeding him various items. The troll, that is, not Corporal Keymans. We receive 1,024 coins for completing the final talk in the primer chapter. And then we get this stage complete page as a chapter break. It includes suggestions for other things you can go and do, such as grinding trolls and how to bank your excess items. This persists on the tracker, and you can click the little question marks for help on specific topics. You can also troll Corporal Keymans, which never gets old.
That was a late change, adding those little breaks.
Okay, the chapter breaks.
Yeah, I was trying to push back against the sort of complete linearity of it. Like, maybe we could let them explore a little bit, get that RuneScape feel. They don't have to go on to the next. Part.
Is that why you have the question marks there with additional suggestions for things you could do as well, so that it's a bit more non-linear?
Yeah, like to me, the ethos of RuneScape is like, I've seen a thing, I want to go do more of it, right? I enjoyed fighting trolls in the cave. I want to go back in there and grind and get more loot. And I think you could go and get capes. There are unique capes.
Yeah.
So there was a point to if you're like my RPG approach is like, I really like staying in an area and doing everything I can in that area before moving on, rather than rushing on to the next area. So it's important to me to not force the player to move onwards, allow them to move onwards if they want to, or allow them to stay. Because if the dotted line trail was there the whole time, it would feel really frustrating to go back into the cave and fight trolls, while there's this dotted line trail very, very pointedly telling you to move onwards to the next area.
Yeah, I think that completionist mindset is also something that's kind of fundamental to RuneScape. You're in an area, you want to do all the achievements in that area, essentially complete all the content before you move on to somewhere else. And I feel like, we'll get onto it later, but the Gudric's paths, which bounced you from Lumbridge then to Vrock and then to Burthorpe, pretty much doing one thing in each place. But you've been introduced to a new area, but don't actually get a chance to engage with it, I think doesn't really fit RuneScape either in that sort of structure.
Yeah, you want the opportunity to stop and do more of the thing that's caught your attention, right? Ultimately, really, something like that should only be touring you round things where you might want to stop.
I guess that's a tricky part. Yeah, I guess that's part of the frustration people had with this tutorial, was that even though it is out in the open world, and theoretically you can just go off and do your own thing whenever you want to, because you are being guided to do the next thing in that process, you feel compelled to do it, just try and get the tutorial over with, and they're not doing the thing they necessarily want to do for themselves, and that can not have the desired effect. Yeah. So I guess from a design standpoint, the takeaway is ensure that there's a path you can follow, but that the player can easily disable that and have some way of re-enabling it, should they choose to. Or how would you approach that?
Yeah, if the player's eye is caught by an activity they enjoy, they should always be free to continue doing that activity, and you should go out of your way to try to entice their attention, right? Like I don't know, like a simple example would be like, say that they get like one piece of a set, Like there's a 3-piece set, and they get 1 piece of the set automatically, and they can stop and grind for the other 2 pieces of the set if they want to, or they can say that doesn't sound very interesting. I don't want to do that. Carry on. Like give them things to distract them, but also give them a clear alternative path if they don't want to be distracted by that option. That's how I would phrase that.
Yeah, we did something a little like that with the Burthorpe paths, in that we got you to go and smith yourself 1 item of gear, and then we provided a optional path to smith yourself a full set of armor.
Yep.
And we found that a lot of people go and do the full set anyway. That they enjoy that sense of completion of fully arraying themselves rather than hitting onto the critical path. So yeah, giving them alternatives, I guess, is helpful. But also in that way, it provides us a way to ensure that players still have access to some means of learning how to do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, smithing a full set of armor is a perfect example. Yeah.
I got to, yes. So pressing next stage activates a breadcrumb trail leading to Isolde near the forge for our next chapter, whom you equip for war. But we'll look at the post-primer content of that Troll Warzone in a future episode, because we still have another primer to do. So I guess the thing we want to consider here is, do you want to make this a 3-hour session today and also do the second primer, or would you like to stop there?
I can probably carry on for a little bit longer.
Okay. Any thoughts in the chat? Are they saying no? Please make it stop. Or
I think we should ask our next slide man. I don't know what the technical term is.
yeah, Modspear, how are you holding up? Yeah, realistically, we're all halfway through the slides at this point. So yeah,
I we should break it and carry on all the time. Yeah.
Even with a 2-hour session, it seems that we've got some absolutely wonderful commentary from Mod Jack. So I think we'll stop there and we'll continue with the Primer 2 for next time, which also has an amazing opening cinematic. So unless there are any questions from the chat you've noticed that you want to answer in our last few minutes?
Someone asked, why don't we do more of those kind of cutscenes? And like they have always been a little bit. People were commenting that it was slightly laggy at the time. And we have always struggled technically with them, and the 2D cutscene style that we're doing now with the panels is really good for illustrating like very difficult things that would be hard to illustrate in our engine. And I'm really keen on that, because it means that we don't have to focus the cutscene on only things that we can depict in our game engine. If you've played Desperate Measures, then you'll see what I mean. But even the start of Desperate Times gives a recap of the Elder Gods, and the recap of the Elder Gods can depict things happening that we couldn't really realistically depict in our game.
Yeah, I mean, it is fundamentally timeless. You know, if those. We find that these cutscenes tend to break over time as the game itself evolves. The user interface changes, new technology comes in, the breaks older assets, and we found that a lot of older cutscenes we have to keep going back and tuning them so that they'll still function. And
NXT just broke all those cutscenes, didn't it? And they just all had to be fixed, and it was an incredible amount of work to go back and fix them all.
Yeah, and so we used to have an external config for these cutscenes. We essentially just ran that video file to an extent. I mean, it essentially assembled all that information, but it was baked into this one file type. And then with the move over to NXT, we had to export those out. So there was then server-side generating those cutscenes through the way that essentially a developer would usually build them, where we'd use an exporter tool to convert them to that format. And there were quite a lot of it didn't quite get things right in some cases, partly because it was not all running server side. It had to go to work using our tick system, while the ones we had before were able to run client side, so we could have much smoother transitions of animations. So there's odd little timing issues involved with the ones we've converted over. So that in itself was quite an issue. So yeah, having the 2D cutscenes just simplifies that process considerably.
Someone asked, did you consider doing a comprehensive tutorial for smithing changes? The primary answer is that it was intended to be, the mining and smithing route was intended to be relatively intuitive, like you could just go do a thing. There's a sort of integrated tutorial where if you do it wrong, it tries to sort of hint what you should be doing. But no, we hadn't planned to do a full tutorial for that. It was intended to be like, it's difficult to optimize, but a tutorial should never be for optimization. A tutorial is for teaching you how the game works. I don't think it needs it.
Yeah, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, the best tutorial I feel is no tutorial. If you can ideally focus your attention on making your core mechanics simple and intuitive enough that you don't need a guided experience to tell you how to use it. Arguably, if you need a guided experience, it's probably an indication that the core mechanics are too complicated.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be complicated exceptions, like open the entry screen or whatever. But yeah, I would totally agree with that. The ideal, the impossible to attain ideal is that you don't need a tutorial.
Okay, any other questions?
I've noted down to talk about the baby troll, but we did that. Someone wants us to sing Baby Shark. I'm pretty sure that was what they meant.
Okay, right. Okay, well, we are bang on 6 o'clock, so this seems like a good time to stop. Thank you so much for joining us, Mod Jack. I don't know if you might want to join us for the next one, or if this might have destroyed your will to live, but you're certainly would be very welcome.
I'll be very excited to come back for another one, yeah, certainly.
So let us know how you felt about us having a 2-hour episode. Was it too much for you? Would you prefer them to... We are likely to continue doing these monthly because the community management team would like us to have more varied content in the Thursday slots, the skill and chills, that sort of thing. But yeah, we have the option of doing them for 1 hour, 2 hours. So let us know about that. And we will see you for the next episode. Luke likes to end each episode with a pithy catchphrase. Do you have one prepared, Modjack?
A pithy catchphrase?
Yeah. Do you have one?
Oh. No, I don't.
Okay, then. I will just say mine. Tune in next time.
Ah!